We're talking today with Mr. Edward Blecourt of Wyoming, Michigan. The interviewer is James Smither of Grand Valley State University. Mr. Blecourt, can you begin by giving us a little bit of your own personal background? For instance, where and when were you born?
I was born in Phoenix, Arizona, October 9, 1981.
And did you grow up in Phoenix, or did you move up?
No, I moved to Michigan when I was between 4 and 5.
Okay. And what did your family do?
Well, my dad was an electrical engineer, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom.
Mm-hmm. And then why did you move up to Michigan?
To be with family. My mom's side of the family is from Cutlerville, and they all lived in Cutlerville. So Phoenix is a long ways from family.
Right.
So.
Okay. And then when did you finish high school?
Year 2000. So May 2000.
All right. And then what did you do after you graduated from high school?
Well, I joined the Army in September 11, 2000, so 1 year before the infamous date. And I didn't leave for basic training until October.
What motivated you to join the Army?
Well, I wanted to travel. I wanted to see stuff that, a little bit more than, Colorado had to offer. So, but I didn't want to go. I joined the reserves because I didn't want to go active duty because there was still a lot to experience here. I wanted school. I had a good job, and so that's why I didn't go active. I stayed reserve.
What job did you have?
I worked at UPS. So.
Okay. And then, do you remember hearing about 9/11, 2001?
Yeah, actually, that was my 4th day of college. I finally, I got home from basic training and I got everything worked out so I could finally go to college. And as soon as I get there, September 11 happened, and I was sure that I was going to get called up.
All right. Well, let's back up then a little bit to your basic training. Where did you go for it, and what did that consist of?
I left for basic training October 25. And I went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for both basic training and AIT. And it was in the winter, so it was cold the whole time. It was freezing.
Okay. Now, what sorts of things do they have you do these days in terms of basic training?
Well, it was a lot different then than it is now. But just basic drills and learning how to fire a weapon, learning the military culture, learning how to wear a uniform, how to talk to people that are higher ranked than you, how to talk to officers, how to walk, how to stand. Pretty much completely changed from being a civilian to, assimilating into a military culture.
And how well did you adjust to that?
It took a while because I was a pretty free spirit, and but it took a while. I ended up enjoying it. There's structure. It was very structured.
Now, what sort of people were you training alongside?
Every type of person you can imagine, from every type. My bunkmate was from Guam, so there's people from Guam, Arizona, New Mexico, New Jersey, New York, Florida, everywhere you can think of in the United States, they were there. So it was a big, kind of a wake-up, because coming from Cutlerville and Grand Rapids, and then you go into a situation like that where there's people from all over, you gain a lot of experience in dealing with people. Now,
on the whole, did the guys you were training with, did they adjust reasonably well? Did you have many people who washed out or just decided to leave?
Well, you couldn't really just decide to leave, but some people did better than others. There's a lot of people that join just because there's nothing else for them, or they can't deal with the real world on their own, so they join the Army. So, but then there's other people that excelled. They're great athletes. They're great with the physical aspect of it. You get a little of everything. And there's some people that just kind of skate through, some people that go unnoticed. So, a little bit of everything.
But by and large, did they finish the training and then move on?
Yeah, almost everyone did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, AIT, is that advanced infantry training?
Advanced individual training.
Individual training.
Yes.
And what kind of training then did you get?
That was all about truck driving, because that was my job, my MOS. So learn how to drive a 5-ton, a deuce and a half, and then tractor trailers. So the road courses and a lot of book work about just typical things about how to drive on in different types of weather, and a lot of it was hands-on because you can't learn how to drive a truck out of a book. But so a lot of driving and a little bit of off-road, a little bit of on-road highway and stuff. So it's pretty diverse.
Okay. Now, how long did this training process last?
I came home in March, so from October to March. But then I didn't actually get into basic training until about 3 or 4 weeks after I left, because I was a hold under, is what it's called when basic training is filled up. So I think it was about 6 months total.
All right. And then, in principle, because you were in the reserves, then when you completed the basic training, what was supposed to happen?
I got to come home.
Yeah.
And then I had to report to my reserve unit and give them all my paperwork and stuff, let them know that the next drill that I'm home and I'll be present.
And then is the expectation simply that you show up on a certain schedule for training exercises? But how often in a peacetime situation would that happen?
Once a month, 2 days, a Saturday and a Sunday, once a month. It's usually the first weekend of every month. And then 2 weeks out of the year, 14 days, you'd go. Being a truck driver, we'd travel a lot. We drive. So we got to go a lot of places. That was one of the things I liked.
Okay. Now, what unit then did you report to when you got up to Michigan?
It was a 180th Transportation out of Muskegon.
All right. And had you had checked in with them already there before September 11th then? Had you started, had you done any, had you met with them and been with them yet?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. It's my very first drill, actually, it's called a railheading, where we put all of our trucks on the train. And then the very next time I was with the company, we drove to Nevada, and we did just exercises out there. And then that was in June, I think, 2001. And then, July, August, we had drill. And then we had drill the weekend following September 11. And what we did was we had to go to Fort Custer and provide security for Fort Custer. So it's kind of weird, I was a 19-year-old kid, and, I had to get put on, we actually surrounded the entire fence perimeter of Fort Custer. And I don't really remember too much, but I don't know if it was just practice or if it was real. So I know I didn't get any bullets, so I don't know how real it could have been, but I'm pretty sure that some people were, it was real for them.
What was the atmosphere like at Fort Custer when you got there then?
It was pretty stressed out. Nobody knew what was going on. And I remember I was a young PFC, E3, and I looked to my sergeants for a lot of advice, especially because a lot of the people that were in at that time were in Desert Storm in '91. So looking to them for their experience and their expertise, and everything really tightened up. You didn't goof around as much anymore, and it became real. The Army, you need to start following the rules and stuff. It was just a lot of fun, and kind of goofing off, and being in different places and stuff before September 11. It completely was a 180-degree change instantly.
All right then. Now, how long was it then before your unit was called up?
Well, I actually, in January 2003, I was involuntarily transferred to Delaware.
Okay.
I got a letter Friday evening saying I had to report to Delaware Monday morning. So I had 3 days, and I missed my plane. We all missed our plane. There was, I'd say about 60 of us. They got cross-leveled, and so we didn't end up going until Tuesday morning because nobody knew what was going on. When we talked to the 180th, they didn't know because we weren't part of the 180th anymore. We were part of the 946 out of Delaware. So when we finally got on the plane, we left at 4:30 in the morning, And then we just flew straight to Fort Dix, New Jersey. And we got there February 4th. That's the day we got to Fort Dix.
And then how long did you stay there?
2 months. Exactly, 2 months.
And what were you doing while you were there?
Well, the unit had a checklist of all things that you had to do before you were deployable. There's everybody had to pass the PT test. Everybody had to qualify with your weapon, and just had to get all your equipment. You just had to pass inspections and stuff for your equipment. And it was kind of nice because there's all brand new trucks. Like the truck that I had 300 miles on it, which isn't a lot for a semi-truck.
Right.
So it was a brand new Freightliner. But it still had to go through all these inspections. Everyone had to get road tested. And let's see. That was pretty much it, just kind of getting to know each other, because there was only 16 people from the 946. Everybody else was cross-leveled in. So a lot of the time was spent organizing and figuring out who was in charge of you now, because nobody knew each other. And it was kind of a crazy situation. This unit was formed 2 months before going into a combat environment, and it was kind of unique.
All right. So this was something that it was not a pre-existing unit then? It wasn't one that had been based there, or was it expanded, or what was going on?
Well, it was they only had about 16 people in their unit, and the story I've heard was that somebody lied and said that they were at 100% strength so that they could get brand new trucks.
Right.
And then that kind of came back to bite them when they got called up and they found out that they were at like 12%. And then they really needed people now because they were called up. So they took people from Ohio, South Carolina, Virginia, Michigan, Kansas. I mean, I think there's 13 states represented in this reserve unit, which is kind of weird.
Yeah.
Because reserves and National Guard, it's usually all from the same state, the same kind of general community. And now this reserve unit is kind of a smorgasbord of everybody.
So essentially, the unit had what amounted to a cadre, and then you had to add the rest of the people to it, except it wasn't really supposed to have been like that.
Yeah, well, actually, the first sergeant was pulled out of retirement. All the officers were from other units, and all the squad leaders were from other units. So it was pretty much just people that were just kind of hanging out. There was nobody really in charge in this place. I think one lieutenant was from there, and he was the company commander. But, he was a second lieutenant, and that's pretty small compared to the big picture of rank.
Yeah. It would be kind of interesting to know how exactly it was that all of that worked, and because it sounds like one of those things you see in a movie, with the mafia coming in and padding the rolls somewhere, but Lord knows what it was. Anyway, so you had kind of an unusual situation going in there. Now, you also mentioned checking out on your weapons. What weapon or weapons were you trained on?
Well, I was just the M16, A2, the typical NATO weapon, and then I volunteered for the Mark 19, which is an automatic grenade launcher. So that fires around a minute, or around a second. So that was kind of neat. So I got trained on that, and how to take it apart and stuff. And then it can be on a tripod, or it can be mounted on a Humvee or a vehicle.
All right. Now, once the unit sort of shakes down, you're there for 2 months, then what happens?
Well, I remember we were on our FTX, and it was kind of weird because they had us, it was in the middle of winter. Well, not at the end of winter, but it was cold and there was snow on the ground. They had us digging foxholes in this big open field in the woods. And it was so cold, it's the coldest I've ever been in my life. And then on our way back from that, we were told that the next morning we were leaving to go over. And this is, I don't know, 6 or 7 days after the initial invasion. And so going from being very cold, got on a plane, it was 24 hours on the plane, but it was only an 18-hour flight. Or maybe it's the other way around, I can't remember. But we flew in full battle rattle, full gear, weapons and all. So it wasn't very comfortable.
And what kind of aircraft were you in? Was it a transport plane or?
No, it was a civilian, but I think it's a DC-10, I think is the type. But yeah, we had all of our gear and everything with us on this plane. And the route we took, we flew from New Jersey to Frankfurt, Germany, down to Rome, but we couldn't get out in Rome because there's something about the Italian government didn't want us getting out of the plane because I don't think they wanted to be involved really. And then we couldn't fly over Saudi Arabia, so we had to fly down over Egypt, and it was neat because we flew over the pyramids in the Nile River at night. So we kind of flew along the Nile River and then up around into the Persian Gulf into Kuwait. And we got there April 4th, 2003.
All right. Now, what was your sort of first impression getting off the plane in Kuwait?
It smelled really bad. It smelled like urine. It wasn't a pleasant smell at all. And it was really scary because we had all of our gear, and everyone's yelling, everyone's running around with, full battle rattle, all their helmets and guns and stuff, and there's all this stuff going on. It's a massive thing of trucks moving, and everybody has a purpose, and we get there, and it was really, really hot. And like I said before, 24 hours earlier, I was freezing cold.
Right.
And so it's a big shock. And plus, it's on the other side of the world, so it's a 9-hour difference. So the jet lag was crazy. And as soon as we get there, we get put in this big tent. And I can't remember what the rank of the guy was, but the last thing he said was, "Welcome to the war." And that was just, it stuck in my mind, welcome to the war. And then we got put in this tent, and we got to acclimate for a couple days at this place called Camp Wolf. And I think they had the best chow hall that I've ever ate at so far. So they had like a buffet style, I remember that. So they stuck us into a tent with no cots, no sleeping bags or anything. What we did was we found cardboard, if you could find it, and that's what we kind of laid on. And one company was packed into a small tent, and then we all had to push over because another company had to get in there because people were coming in droves. And one thing that was kind of funny is we got there a day early because we were the 946 transportation. Well, they really initially called for the 946 medical.
Oh.
And when we got there, I remember I was standing there and I heard my first sergeant go report. And he said, "Oh, what are you doing here?" And we just flew 24 hours. It's not like we just went down the road and we were like, "Oh, we'll come back later." So we were there a day early. So then the 946 medical ended up taking our flight. So when we got there, they weren't really prepared for a company of our size. And we had to wait for our trucks because our trucks were a day behind us on a boat. So kind of hanging around, but we were sleeping on top of each other in really tight quarters.
All right. Now, how long did it take then for things to start getting to what you might call normal?
I remember being at Camp Wolf for 3 or 4 days, and then when the ship came in with our trucks, we had to go find them. But the thing is, they didn't come off in a big group, and then it wasn't just this little area. The parking lot was ours. Everything was scattered.
Okay.
So we had to break up, and each squad was broken up into teams, and we had to go hunt for our stuff. And that was kind of weird because our nomenclature was stenciled on with spray paint. Well, if somebody couldn't find their truck and they saw our truck, it only takes spray paint to take our truck. So we were missing Humvees and we were missing all kinds of stuff. And then, I don't know, sometimes we acquired things and, I didn't personally, but I've heard like rumors of, but that's just kind of the way it was. Everyone was just kind of grabbing because everyone wanted to get going. Everyone wanted to be a part of it because the feeling was we were going to be there for maybe 3 months.
Right. Yeah. Now, what sort of preparation did they actually give you for going over there by way of stuff to prepare you for fighting in the desert or with shots or stuff like that? I mean, what did you get before you went over?
Well, They gave us a lot of vaccinations, and we started the anthrax and smallpox. We got the smallpox right before we left, and the anthrax, both of them were mandatory, so you didn't have a choice. And other than that, there was really no desert training at all. I mean, besides giving us a desert uniform. But
Did they tell you anything about special problems involved with maintaining the vehicles in desert conditions or anything else like that?
no,
All right. Okay, so how long did it take to actually sort out things to actually find the vehicles and thus put the unit together?
I think it took a couple days. And once we got a general idea of, like, once we got most of our stuff, then we searched for our place to live. And I remember going to 2 or 3 different places, and they didn't know we were coming, or they didn't have room for us. The very first, once we got to our destination that day, they didn't have room for us, so we slept outside. So we unpacked our cots and everything, and we slept outside. And we didn't have a place to live that night. And then the next day, they cleared out an area of the warehouse. And this warehouse is massive. I'd say there's about 18,000 people living in this warehouse. And each person had about 1.5 feet in between each cot. So it was lined up, and that's all you had, men, women, all grouped together. There was no special area for girls. It was just all kind of based by squad, platoon, and it just kind of...
Transportation units and so forth, sort of the things that are not line units, so those have women in them then just routinely. What proportion of your company was women, either the Michigan one or this one?
Well, the overseas one, I think there's 16 to 20 women.
Out of a total of how
Out
many?
of maybe 160. So
about 10% or something like that.
yeah, I'd say so.
Okay.
Wasn't really that many.
And were there any particular issues with having them there, or did you all just kind of go forward?
It just, I don't know. It was kind of weird at first, just because when I was in the reserves, beforehand, women were always separated. They had their own barracks, their own showers and stuff. And now it was just kind of all mixed in. A soldier's a soldier, and it took a little bit to get into that mindset. But then after a while, it wasn't a big deal. It's the way it is. We've been living together for 3 months now. You don't really look at them that way. You just kind of see them as your friends.
All right. Now, how long then, once they get you settled, how long is it before they actually put your unit to work?
Not too long. Once we got into that big warehouse, I think the next day we went out on a mission.
Okay. And can you describe that mission?
Well, we were in southern Kuwait, and we drove through Kuwait across the border. And as soon as you got across the border, there's this little town called Safwan, and just crowds of people standing begging on the side of the road, and kids and stuff. And we had all kinds of, we were loaded with food and water enough for 6 days. So we had plenty of food. So we're throwing food out to these kids and stuff. But to us, we were in a war zone. This is when the actual war was going on. And you didn't really know who was who or anything. And these kids and people and stuff, they're climbing all over your trucks. And there's, that first time, it was just, you didn't really think too much. You just, because everyone's waving and at you and stuff. But then after a little bit, you got kind of nervous, because once you started to hear about people stealing things off your trucks, or throwing grenades and things like that in your truck, while they're up here talking to you and stuff, you don't know who is nice and or who's friendly and who's not.
So there were people who could speak English who were coming up and talking to you? Or?
No.
So they were just speaking Arabic and...
Yeah.
Did you have anybody with your unit who knew any Arabic?
No. So, well, we went up to this place called Cedar 2, and what we did was we took fuel from Kuwait, and brought it up to a base in southern Iraq, and then another unit would come and pick it up from there and bring it forward to to these other
Combat
little.
units, yeah.
So that's what we did, and we streamlined it. The first time we ended up staying overnight because they closed down the MSR, and we stayed overnight, and then we came back the next day. So it was probably.
What's an MSR?
The MSR is a main supply route. So it was Highway 1, so it's pretty much the only highway coming from Kuwait going up. And so that was closed down because I think a Marine convoy got ambushed and stuff, so they closed it down. So we ended up staying a night, which was another night of sleeping outside, the first of many.
Now, when you're doing this, sleeping outside or in these improvised conditions, I mean, you're out in the desert. Were there any problems with, bugs or scorpions or anything else like that, or was it all?
Yeah, there's a lot of bugs, a lot of sandflies.
So how do you deal with that stuff if you're just trying to sleep outside?
You just deal with it, really. I mean, one time I got bit 180 sometimes in one night. They're so small they could fit through the mosquito net. So you just kind of deal with it. I mean, you kind of hide in your sleeping bag, but it's hot. So, you don't want to zip up your sleeping bag too much. You either sweat or you get eaten by bugs. It's kind of the way it is.
All right. Now you said you were able to streamline this. You found ways to make the trip more efficient.
Yeah, we could eventually. We did it probably 10 times or so. We could go there and back in one day. So either we drove faster or we just kind of cut out rest stops and things like that because we just wanted to get back to a cot because what we were doing was just, like I said, we were sleeping outside on the tops of our tankers and the tops of our trucks and the hoods, and if there's a sandstorm, you sleep inside the cab, which wasn't too comfortable if you were the driver because you had the steering wheel right here. So.
Doing this now, as this stage is going on, how much did you know about what was sort of happening in the campaign itself? Were you kind of getting regular information or just bits and pieces?
Nothing. Yeah, no idea. Just talking to other people in the chow hall and stuff. So that's all you got because we weren't getting mail yet. There was no Stars and Stripes wasn't. It wasn't available yet to find out what's going on.
They didn't have television hookups for you or anything
Yeah,
else
we didn't have any telephones. Like to even call home, you had to stand in line for 3 or 4 hours, and you got 20 minutes whether you got a hold of somebody or not. And then you had to dial like 30 numbers just to get to the States. So, that ate up 3 minutes of your time right there just dialing. So there was really you had no idea what was going on. Unless it came down from your platoon leader or platoon sergeant who would tell you something happened or, in your convoy briefings.
Okay. Now, you do this initial run, you said, about 10 times. Now, then what happens after that? You've done that basic kind of run.
Well, then I don't remember what came first. I think what they were doing was we did a humanitarian missions first, and they'd buy gasoline from Kuwait, and we would run it up to, it's a town called Latifia, and they had an oil refinery up there. So we'd bring the gasoline there, and then they would disperse it to colleges and stuff to run the generators because they didn't have any electricity. Right. And they tried to get colleges and concrete factories and electric and power plants and stuff. They tried to get all that stuff working again so people could have electricity. And so we did that for a while. And then they asked for volunteers to move to in the first run we would run to Camp Cedar. Well, that was such a big dust bowl. And it was just rotten. The trucks would get stuck. It was in the middle of the desert. There was no road. Right. So they moved it over across the main highway down this road to, they call it Cedar 2. And it's down by Ur. I don't know if you know about Ur. Well, it's where Abraham was born. And it was down the road from there. And it was actually on the road where that girl, Jessica Lynch, she was supposed to be going down that road to the Air Force Base, which is and but I guess they took a wrong turn and went on the street before, which kind of gets to the same. It gets to Nasiriyah, but they they made a wrong turn and went down the wrong one. Well, we were down there. There's Cedar 2, and then there was and Talil is the Air Force Base, which is right there, and then Nasiriyah is. You could see that from both all the places. So that's where we went. 40 of us volunteered to move up there, and while everyone else kept continuing humanitarian, we would run from Cedar 2 and pick up fuel and run it to either BIOP, which is the Baghdad International Airport, or to it was LSA Anaconda or Balad. So then we were running up through Baghdad and stuff.
You're kind of going up and down in was it the Tigris Valley or the Euphrates or in between them?
We crossed the Euphrates a few times on that route.
All right.
It kind of depended on where we were going.
Okay. So this is sort of now middle and late 2003 you're doing this, or?
I'd say it's like the middle of summer.
Okay. Now, how hot was it getting in the middle of the summer?
It was getting pretty hot. The hottest day there was in August. It was 148 degrees.
What do you do when it's over 120 and that kind of thing? I mean, what measures do you take to deal with that?
Well, the trucks had air conditioning, but it malfunctioned all the time, and it seemed like me and my truck buddy, our air conditioning kept breaking all the time. So the things that you can do, the air conditioning actually didn't even really work that well. So first thing we did was we punched out all the vents in the truck, and then we'd take our water bottles and stick it in the vent holes, and the air conditioning would actually just keep our water cold. But because our air conditioning didn't work, we would keep our water in somebody else's truck, and then every time you stopped, we'd trade out hot water for cold water. And so then if they didn't have any cold water to give that they didn't want to give up, we'd take we called it cab cool water because it was still an air-conditioned cab as opposed to ours, so it wasn't as hot as ours.
All right. Now, how risky or dangerous were these runs? You're going back and forth to Baghdad or beyond. I mean, how regular were attacks or problems with roadside bombs or things in this period?
Well, it seemed that we pushed the limits. The speed limit was 40 miles an hour, and we went way faster than that. And it seemed like the convoy in front of us would get hit. There was many times where I drove through ambushes where this company is in a firefight with somebody, and we just drove through, because if we stop, it didn't get out, and then it'd just be really confusing. So the best thing to do is just drive through it. Or we drive through an area, and when we got to our destination, the convoy behind us would show up, a couple hours later, and say, man, right after you guys went through, we got hit with a couple of IEDs and got in a firefight for an hour and a half. So it seemed like it was always in front of us or behind us. So.
Now, you had fuel trucks, was that it? Or did you okay. So now, would be a particularly dangerous thing to be driving, right?
Yeah, well, especially the times when we were carrying gasoline, because gasoline is a lot more flammable than diesel. But most of the time we were carrying the JP-8, which is just a standard military fuel. But depending on what hit it, it was still flammable. So it was very dangerous, especially going down. Went under a lot of underpasses. There's this place called RPG Alley where there's RPGs all the time. But once again, it's either the people in front of us or the people behind us. So, I mean, there was IEDs and stuff. There was this one truck, there's an RPG coming at them, and I think it was a cow. A cow walked in front of it, and it exploded, right?
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. And then another one it was kind of weird because the IEDs weren't really that potent yet. They were, I mean, when they said watch out for IEDs, we were like, what's an IED? What does that mean? Some of the things they do is just put some explosive in a Pepsi can and throw it off a bridge, or a car battery, just throw it off a bridge, or a piano underneath an underpass, piano wire. And, you know, those are some of the things, because it's real low tech and it wasn't really as organized as it has become. And we didn't have armor. There was fiberglass. That's all we had in our trucks. It was just a typical Freightliner like you see on the roads here. So, you know, even though it was such a small explosive, it still would do a lot of damage.
You could disable the truck, or if it was in the right place, it could blow something up.
Then they started to get a little bit more sophisticated after a while. And I actually had an IED. It was an artillery round that they rigged up with a cell phone. And they weren't expecting or anticipating us to be going as fast as we were. And when he detonated it, it was at head level, but instead of hitting right here on the side of my truck, it hit back there because we were going faster than he thought we were. So it blew a hole about the size of a softball in my truck and started spraying fuel all over the place. And me and my truck buddy, I was passenger, he was driving. We always heard these stories of what's called a combat drop, where you flick some switch here and this, and then you pull down the trailer brakes and it disconnects everything. And the theory is that the trailer slides off the back of the truck and it rips the air cables and it falls to the ground and does whatever it's supposed to, and you just kind of get out of there.
But wouldn't that create an obstacle for whatever was behind you?
Yeah, well, what we thought that an RPG hit our truck and didn't blow up and was sitting inside a tank of fuel. And I didn't really want to be driving around with that, because that is a 7,000-gallon bomb. So we tried, and we were in the back of the convoy anyways. There was, I think, one truck behind us and then with a bobtail for recovery. So there wasn't like that much behind us. So we tried that, and it works good on paper, but in real life it doesn't, because when it slid down, it hooked up onto these little ramps and it got wedged, and we were dragging it. So I had to stop, get out, and get rid of this thing. And it took about 20 minutes. And all this time, the guy took off running, and he got in his truck and took off. And it just so happened that I think they were 101st Airborne were doing a rotation, and they were switching out. Well, the people that were coming to their other little outpost ran into them. And the back of his truck was full of RPGs and AK-47s and a lot of explosives and stuff. And so they caught him. And apparently he is the same guy. I found out a couple, that was September 20th. September 9th. No, September 11th, I think. Anyways, the kid that I was in basic in AIT with died at the exact same spot. So there's a good chance that this guy killed my friend. And then he tried to kill me. So it was weird. And that was right after there was a head-on collision. He died 2 days after a head-on collision that we had with a civilian Iraqi, and one of our trucks collided head-on at 60 miles an hour. And he died. And then 2 days later, my friend from AIT died from an IED attack, and then 11 days after that, I got hit with my IED. So, there was a time when it was very stressful. You had no idea what was going on, and we didn't have radios in our trucks or anything, so it was really hard to communicate with each other.
Now, how did the sort of situation or what you were doing then kind of continue to change over time? You've gotten this more dangerous type of duty that you've taken on here. Now, did that duty get easier or harder over time, or did you switch out of it to something else?
Well, eventually, because they kept telling us that you're going home next month, you're going home next month, you're going home next month. And this colonel, it was kind of weird because it was his first deployment, which I don't know how you make it to a colonel at 30 years in the Army and you've never been deployed before. But he kept saying, this is the 49th group, he kept saying, I'm going to close the doors on this operation. You know, I'm gonna be the last one out of here. Well, after we started doing the missions running north, well, the 49th group got their orders to go home. Well, on my birthday, October 9th, he came and said that we did such a great job that they're extending us for 6 months. And so him and everybody else left, and they left our company in Iraq. And so they didn't really know what to do with us anymore because another group came in and took over, and they didn't really need us. So what they did was they sent us down to Kuwait, and what we did was we pulled, it's called QRF, the Quick Reaction Force, for the main base down in Kuwait. So we sat there and just waited in case there was an attack on Kuwait. So we sat there for about 5 months.
All right. So how did you spend your time then for 5 months?
Well, I play a lot of video games because they kind of set it up, the company set it up to give us some time off, but what the colonel wanted, the colonel that was in charge, wanted everybody to be in full battle rattle 24/7, just in case. So what we did was we broke it up into 3 teams. One team had 3 days off, the other team had to be within arm's reach of your gear for 3 days, and then the other team had to be in your gear for 3 days. And then there's drills at all hours of the night, race to see if you could get to the main gate in a certain amount of time, and with all your teams. So then there's a big rotation. And other than that, when you're off for 3 days, you were off, but there was nothing to do. There's a gym and an AFES to go to. And then when you had them other 6 days, you kind of had to sit in your room, and our room was pretty small. It was about half the size of this stage, and 3 or 4 people lived in there on bunk beds.
Was the facility at least air conditioned this time, or?
I think it was. It was another big warehouse, but they were kind enough to divide it up into cubicles.
So it was at least better than what you had when you first got there.
Yeah, definitely. And there's no bugs, and everything outside was concrete. You know, it was in this big. It was at Camp Doha, so it was a big warehouse facility. So in between the warehouses was big parking lots and everything. So there wasn't really that many bugs there.
Doha, that's a town in Qatar. Were you there, or was this still in Kuwait?
No, this is still in Kuwait. The actual base that we were at was called Doha. I don't know if it was named after that place or not. I don't know, but it was called Doha.
All right. So, but basically, you didn't have opportunity sort of to go off the base or anywhere else.
No, once in a while they would allow you to go into Kuwait City because it's right outside of Kuwait City. So I did that a few times, I think twice. And then you weren't really supposed to, but you could kind of break away and roam around. And then I tried to, go see what it was like to be in Kuwait City, try to find some alleys and stuff, and try to get away from the tourism and actually go see what it was like. And this one lady, I remember, I'm sitting there because it was my turn to watch the truck, with all of our gear, and because we didn't really carry our weapons just because it's, kind of aggressive looking, a whole group of people walking around with weapons. So this lady was up in her apartment building up here, and she called down to us, and she came running with this food, with this fish that she got out of the Persian Gulf, and this flatbread and this rice. And, I tried not to eat it, but she was just really kind of forcing it on us. So I tried it, and it's impolite to not take something, and here we are in their country, but I didn't want to get sick. But I kind of ate it, and then when she turned, I just kind of threw it under the truck, and I was like, it's good.
Yeah. By this time, were they telling you much of anything about how to get along with the locals, or how to behave or not? Was there any kind of training?
No, I remember when we first started the missions and we got to meet people. I was all about it. I'm this young kid. I wanted to experience stuff. That's the whole purpose of joining the Army. Is I I wanted to talk to people. Well, it got so, I don't want to say annoying, but it was, because instead of talking to like one or two, crowds of hundreds, and they wouldn't kind of stay over there and talk to you. They would be right here in your face. And then, like I said before, you don't know which one is good and which one's bad. And I ended up not liking them very much after about 3 months, and I just avoid all contact with them. But it was kind of neat because on our humanitarian missions, we also went to Najaf, and Najaf is the holy city. And there was some kind of agreement that no Americans would go into Najaf because it was a holy city. Right. So we would go to a concrete factory just outside of it, and that concrete factory would process the gas that we give them and stuff and get running and make concrete and, you know, help things and run generators to give the city power. And we were the first Americans they've ever seen, which is weird. And I mean, some people they've seen on TV and stuff, but we're the first actual Americans that these people have seen. And you'd think that by now everyone, you know, we're Americans, and we kind of have, our presence is everywhere. But it was kind of weird. Same with the nomads on the way in some of these really distant places that we were traveling. We'd stop and they'd have no idea who we were, why we were there. They really had no idea that there was even a war going on. There's why are you here, and why, you know, why do I have to stop my sheep for, you know, 65 trucks to go by? You know, what's going on here? Why are you on my land? It's just, that's even more weird because they didn't have a radio, they didn't have TV, they had a Quran and their sheep, and that was it. So that was kind of interesting to try to fumble through a conversation with them, because they don't really conversate with their own people, let alone somebody from a different culture and a different language. And I remember them smelling really bad. You couldn't get too close to them.
Right. Now, over the course of time, were you picking up any Arabic at all? Were you learning anything of that? Or?
Well, I learned how to say stop, go away. One of the curses, the evil eye. You know, you can, you know, not showing your feet to them.
Not showing your feet to them?
Yeah, the bottom of your feet. If you show them the bottom of your feet, it's disrespect in their culture. I learned that because some of the times on our humanitarian missions, we'd go to the concrete factory or the power plants and stuff. And one of the guys, his name was Abbas, and his wife would bring us meals, and we'd hang out with him once we got there because there's really nothing to do. And sometimes it'd take a full day to download everybody. So we just sit there and hang out with him, and he was actually in charge of it. You know, so he kind of told us, he gave us tea, you know, the real Iraqi tea, and his wife would make us real Iraqi food, and we ended up trusting him and her, so we'd actually eat it. And just would tell us about, you know, what he used to do, and, you know, how he got to where he was. He spoke English. He was educated in Great Britain, and you know, and just kind of hung out with him. We learned a lot from him.
But there's still not really anything coming down?
No, nothing from...
Like that?
Yeah. Okay.
So then, if we're going to follow in your sequence here, you've got this span of 5 months there where, you know, you're based in Kuwait and you're not doing much of anything. What comes after that?
Well, by now we've been there a year. And I was actually there a year and 5 days. And they didn't want us to, well, the rumor was they weren't going to keep us there a full year because, you know, if we're there a full year, then it means they got to give us veteran benefits and stuff. And that was kind of what was going on. But little did we know that we were veterans anyways. And then we were like, well, then they're not going to keep us there a year because that means it's another combat stripe on our Class A's. You know, they're not going to make us stay here for 365 days. So then every day for 6 or 7 days, we got pulled off missions. Somebody came and replaced us on QRF. So then we were doing absolutely nothing for about 2 weeks. And every day it would come down that we were going home the next day. So we'd pack. get everything ready to go. And then that night, they'd say, we got bumped. So I'll let you know in the morning. So then we'd go to formation the next morning, and they say, we're going home tomorrow. So you'd repack all your stuff. Later that night, say, oh, we got bumped. So that went on for about 2 weeks. So I didn't have any idea until the day I got on that plane that I was coming home. I had no clue.
All right. Then they finally get you on the plane. Did you have any kind of sort of debriefing or anything else like that? Were they telling you about what you're supposed to say or not say about this stuff or anything else like that? Or they just load you up?
No, I remember we were back at Camp Wolf with the Great Chow Hall. And we sat there for about 2 days. Or maybe it was a full day. I think it was a full day. And I still didn't believe that I was going home. And then we got on the plane, and we flew home. And as soon as we flew into Amsterdam, and we hung out there for about 6 hours. And then we flew to New Jersey. As soon as we got over American airspace, there's a big pillow fight. But other than that, there were no briefings, no nothing. We got to stay at Fort Dix for 2 weeks to kind of settle down, and then just kind of went our own ways.
Okay. And at that point, are you still on active duty at that point? Okay.
I was on active duty for a month after that.
And where did you serve then?
In my house,
Okay.
on my couch.
You're officially there. All right. What was it like to get back home after all that?
Well, it was strange because a lot of things changed, but really nothing did. I don't know, like my brother had a car, my sister moved to a different city, some major things like that. But everyone was still kind of doing the exact same thing that they were before. I didn't have a place to live, so I stayed with my uncle for a couple days. It was strange because when I tell people that I just came home from Iraq, there's a lot of, like, what do you mean? Because we left before it happened, before the actual war announcement. And then to come home so soon after the war, nobody really knew that people from Michigan had left because no actual unit from Michigan had gone. It's because we were, from Delaware. So right. Delaware had a huge parade and stuff. And when I came home, there were quite a bit of people at the airport, and I made a front page of the newspaper. But other than that, I mean, unless you read the newspaper, you had no idea.
Do you find that the people you ran into just really didn't even know much about what was going on over there? Or?
Yeah, I ended up meeting this girl, and I told her that I was in Iraq, and she's, what's that? What's going on there? What do you mean? I was gone for 15, 16 months out of my life. This is such a huge thing. How could you not even know what's going on? And it was weird. I mean, a lot of people, thanked me and all that stuff, but no, I don't think, unless you know that somebody was over there, no one's life was really affected. I mean, there's something on the news and in the paper, but other than that, everyone still went to work, and they still made money, they still bought cars, they still watched TV, they didn't really affect their lives very much.
Okay. Was it sort of hard to sort of adjust to that, to kind of get back into that, go back to work or school or anything like that?
The hardest thing, there is so structured. Somebody was always there to tell you what to do. There's 4 meals guaranteed a day, and even like in this big country the size of California, my world was only about the size of the cab of my truck, and that was it. And then when you get home and there's no one there to tell you, you can, like, especially at Doha, for 6 days you couldn't leave your cubicle, so to go outside, I could do, I can do what I want, to wear my clothes how I want, it's kind of weird, then to get in my car and drive and go to a store and not have to wait in line, or to get on the phone. That was another big thing, was I bought a cell phone, and I had my brother buy it, and he mailed it to me so that when I came home, I could call people, and receiving phone calls, making a phone call without standing in line for hours, getting on the internet without having to pay like $3 a minute and having like a 20-minute limit. All these little things that, you weren't really sure if you were allowed to do that, but then it kind of, I'm on my own again. At the time I didn't really have a girlfriend, I lived on my own before I left, so I didn't like live with my mom or anything. I was 22 when I came home, so I'm an adult. I can do what I want, but you like go over here and you're like, where? Oh yeah, no one's gonna tell me I can't do that.
Right.
So that was. It took probably a month to kind of, I don't know, to not miss your friends, because your friends were always within arm's reach for a year and a half, and then now most of them live in Saginaw or Kansas. My truck buddy lives in Kansas. Another really good friend of mine lives in Chicago. Then they're not right there anymore. They're not in the next cubicle. They're not in the truck in front of you or the truck behind you.
So now, did you go back to work or to college, or what did you do then once you kind of began to sort things out a little bit?
I went right back to work. I worked 2 jobs. I worked at 7-Eleven and UPS. And as soon as my leave was up, and then I just kind of, that summer, I just kind of hung out, and same with that fall. And then that January, I went back to school. And started doing that again. Got an apartment about a month after I came home. So then one of my friends from overseas, he was kind of missing the whole thing. So we kind of hooked up together and lived in an apartment for a year. And then I bought my house, and then he moved in with me. He lived with me in my house for a year. So.
Now, what college are you going to?
I'm going to Davenport now, but at the time I went to Grand Rapids Community.
Okay. Now, are you still in the reserves at this point? No. Okay. Because your record here has your service dates going into 2008.
Yeah,
so.
March 2008 I got out of the reserves. I actually, from all the times driving, I was a convoy security with the Mark 19. There's some days where we were on the road for long periods of time, and not all the roads were paved. So standing for long periods of time in a moving vehicle is really hard on your knees. So it really beat my knees up. And just this past Thursday, I had surgery on my right knee, and then when this heals, I'm going to have surgery on my left. But eventually, after a while, I couldn't run anymore. I couldn't march anymore. I had a real hard time. So I applied for a profile.
Which is?
It's kind of hard to explain, but it's limitations, physical limitations that the Army recognizes.
Right.
And there was so much stuff, couldn't march, couldn't carry a weapon, can't walk long distances, can't wear boots because of my knee problems, that it made me non-deployable. So they let me out.
Right now, is the Army paying for the knee surgeries?
Oh yeah, it's a VA service connected.
How easy or hard has it been to kind of connect with the VA or get this kind of thing provided? I mean, did the system work reasonably well for you?
Yeah, it's been going well for me, but it's taken about 4 years to get surgery done. But being the first rotation to go overseas and also one of the first people to come home, I got in ahead of the big surge of veterans, and even the Iraqi freedom and enduring freedom, which includes Afghanistan, they had moved to the front line ahead of Vietnam and Desert Storm and World War II in Korea. So there was such a small number of us, and then to get moved in front of all of them too, it's actually worked out pretty good for me.
Okay. Now, in those sort of 4 years there, but you're back and you're still in the reserves, were you kind of going back to doing the usual weekend training and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I was an E4, a specialist when I got deployed, and then I became an E5, a sergeant, and became a squad leader. I left Muskegon and I transferred to Bay City because that's where a lot of my friends were that I was overseas with, and instead of losing the connection with some of these people, I just transferred over there. It's the same company, it's still the 180th, but a detachment.
Right.
So then I went over there, I got promoted, put in a squad leader position. The Army Reserves kind of changed from a reserve status to a kind of an important everyday part of the military. So drills became 3 and 4 day drills as opposed to just 1 and 2 day. They took the vehicles, and all funding is overseas in the war. So they took all the vehicles, all the training aids and stuff. So it got pretty difficult training. There's a lot of people joining because they want the excitement of going to war, you know, the romance of it. So there's a lot of young people, but there's no one. The older people, the experienced people aren't staying in. They're getting out because they understand what it's like. And so it's hard to teach these young kids that are 18, 19 without anything. But I had this whole knowledge of a year and a half being over there. So I stayed in to kind of help some of these guys understand not the major things, just the little things about what it means to be deployed. And then I ended up getting promoted to staff sergeant, and that happened a little bit before I got out.
Okay. One of the things you were mentioning here and talking about this reserve work again was you had a sort of a lack of vehicles or equipment, because what actually happens to these trucks and vehicles and stuff when you take them over to the desert? What kind of problems do you get with them?
Well, nothing was really established when I was there. A lot of the roads were just beat up, or one of the roads was all pitted with either like bombs or 50 cal shells and stuff. That really tears up a road from the initial push forward.
Right.
And there's all kinds of just like blown up debris all on the side of the road, and they didn't clean it up when they went through. So these trucks, they took a beating, and they were brand new when we got them, and they definitely were not brand new when we gave them back. And a lot of times they'd end up giving the ones that weren't repairable by our standards to the Iraqi Army or the Iraqi National Guard. And then the Army would buy new ones from, whoever, Freightliner, AM General, whoever they had a contract with, and then ship them ones over for the new companies that would get there.
Okay. Was dust a particular problem?
Dust was horrible. There was times, it was on MSR Tampa. It was about 80-mile stretch of the worst road you can possibly imagine. It was about 12 lanes wide, and it was a free-for-all because it's so dusty you couldn't see the hood of your truck. And you're trying to get to where you're going by a certain time because they're waiting for you, so you're going about 60 miles an hour. And then every time we went down this road, at least 3 trucks would break their leaf springs. I've seen so many accidents on this from head-on collisions because you had no idea what part of the road you were on. And it was in the middle of the desert, so it wasn't paved. So you can imagine that there's one time we had a convoy where we were escorting KBR, and which is that, a Halliburton or whatever it's called. And it was our truck, their truck, our truck, their truck, and it was probably 65 of our trucks and probably 100 of theirs. So this convoy was miles long.
Right.
Driving down this road in one direction, kicking up all this dirt and dust and sand, and then you got another convoy coming this way against you, but you didn't know what lane you were in. You had no idea, and then all of a sudden there'd be a truck.
Right.
So you'd have to go, jerk over and get out of their way. Well, you don't know if someone's next to you either. And when you're going down the road, I got some video of it, you'd hit your head on the ceiling because it's such a rough road. And the way there was a lot smoother because you had a full load on your truck. You had all that fuel back there, but on the way home, you were empty. So that trailer was bouncing around, just jerking you all over the place. And a lot of people had bad backs and, bad knees and bad shoulders from the white knuckle drive, 80 miles on this road.
Now, when you're doing that kind of thing, if you were the one who was stationed with the Mark 19, did you have to stand while the truck was driving, and that's sort of part of what got
you're standing because you still had to try to keep a watch of what's going on, because what an easy target. People, all this confusion, and then here you are sitting on the side of the road and they can't see you anyways, but you can see them, and we're confused, they're not. They can see on the outside. So it was kind of when you were in that position, you felt like you were responsible for the protection of everybody else, because if you missed something, then somebody that could get hurt.
Now, did you ever have occasion to actually fire the weapon, or did you just?
We test fired it a lot. But, like I said, it was either the convoy in front of us or the convoy behind us. And I don't know, we were shot at every single day, but the rules of engagement were so strange that you had to see the person actually shooting at you to do anything. So just because somebody has a gun doesn't mean that you can do anything. And if there was an explosion or an IED, the guy probably did it with a cell phone. Well, there's 5 people sitting there with cell phones. Which one do you shoot? I remember one time we went to this town and they were celebrating some cleric that died a couple thousand years ago, and every one of them had guns. There's about 10,000 people, and they all had guns. And they were all shooting them up in the air. And I know for a fact that one of them pointed a gun at us, and because when I got to my destination, there's bullet holes in my truck. But we're driving about 10 miles an hour because the streets are crowded. And even if somebody shot at you and you saw it, what did they expect us to do? Shoot at them? Well, then you got 10,000 people shooting at 15 guys with M16s. It's really not that practical to. So the rules of engagement are so strange, and they had it all printed in Arabic. So they knew exactly what they could get away with. They were not afraid of our guns, but they were afraid of like a broom handle. So that's. You'd find other ways to keep them away from your truck when they're either climbing on it, begging for food or trying to sell you bayonets or whatever, or when you stopped on the side of the road for a break or to switch out drivers and stuff, they just crowd you, and they're not afraid of your gun, and you can't really use it anyways because of the rules of engagement. So you had to find other ways to protect yourself. Looking back, I feel kind of bad because, a lot of them were just people and they wanted to know what you're doing. Hey, how are you? My name's Mohammed or whatever his name is, what's your name? But it's that one guy in that crowd that could ruin it for everybody and give you a really bad day. So you kind of had to treat everybody like the enemy.
You were also not in a situation, which would have been true of at least some of the combat units, where you weren't stationed in a particular place in the community where you had an opportunity even to get to know the ones around you. So you could at least begin to figure out who you could trust or not. I guess you had something like that with the fellow at the concrete factory, but you didn't have a lot of opportunities, and driving through the crowd, you can't know.
There was, until now I can't remember the place, what it's called, Scandia. It was a place where everyone just kind of would stop for a break, and there was a fuel point for the Humvee, because a Humvee has to fuel up a lot more than a semi-truck. And it started out where we paid these kids to jump into the creek off this bridge, and we give them $1 or a toothbrush or something. Well, it blew up into this huge shop where these kids would bring their friends, and then there was a whole group of people, and then there was just barbed wire fence. And they trade with us and stuff. And then they actually would build things that, little huts and stuff. So where they'd actually try to sell us baby hawks and chickens and give donkey rides. And I guess now there's a driving range and all that stuff there. But it all started with guys like me paying these 2 kids. Well, anyways, we'd stop there every time, and there was you kind of get to know some of the people there, because you'd see them every time you stop, and you'd be like, hey, I know you, and you'd be like, but generally, you didn't get to know the community as a whole, because we're always on the road being truck drivers.
Mm-hmm. Okay. How would you characterize the morale of the unit you served with while you were over there?
Well, it had its ups and downs, because none of us knew when we were going home.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then the leave, when they actually authorized leave finally, because they realized we were going to be there for more than a couple months.
Mm-hmm.
So then there was a lottery system, and you got points for how many dependents you had, and those of us that volunteered to live up north in Iraq and not got one more point more than the people that stayed back doing the humanitarian mission. So, like me, I got to go on leave, whereas my buddy, he had a wife and kid, but he chose not to go home just because he didn't want to say goodbye twice. But there's one girl, she had 3 kids at home, so she lived up north, so she got a lot of points. Mm-hmm. But instead of going home, she went to Germany, and that kind of caused a lot of tension, because, why do you get to go home just because you have a wife? I have a family at home too. I don't have a wife, but I'm only 19. Why do you get to go home over me? Because only like 5% could be gone at one time, and it started in October and it ended a little after Christmas. So there wasn't enough time for everyone to go on leave. So, and the point system kind of created a lot of tension, and no one really knew when we were going home. And a lot of people, if you didn't have a wife or girlfriend or anything, it wasn't as hard sometimes as some of the other people who had, a little bit more established. So it kind of depended on the day, really.
Do you think it's generally a good thing to have a unit of people who can ideally sort of train together, serve together, and go in and come out together, rather than have people rotate in and out all the time?
I think that I definitely would have preferred going over with the established hierarchy of, because when we got to Fort Dix, all these people that were in charge of me, I had no idea who they were. And the other people that I did know were in different platoons and such. So here this guy is taking me into an environment that no one knows what's going to happen. I don't know this guy. This guy doesn't know me. What's going to happen. I think that's one reason why I like the reserves before, this all happened, because in the reserves, these guys, they all started out as E4s and stuff, and they made it up through the ranks, and they were all, some of these guys had been with each other for 14 years, training with each other and such. And then we get here, and then just this unit's been pieced together, and 2 months after, that we had like 5 E8s, master sergeants and stuff, and no, I got 2 weeks rank on you. No, I got 2 weeks rank on you. I'm in charge. No, I'm in charge. I outrank you. I outrank you. And there's a lot of that, all the way down to the E6s. I've been in E6 since this date. Oh, I've been in E6 since this date, so I'm in charge. And then, being a lower enlisted, seeing all that go on, it's like, man, who cares? Just somebody take charge. So what if he outranks you by 2 weeks? Let him. If he's better than you, let him take over the job.
It's not necessarily how an army works.
Yeah, I know.
And to look back at the whole thing now, how do you think your experience in the Army wound up affecting you?
Well, I'm actually a pretty good teacher because of all the experience I have teaching these younger people who don't know anything. And being in a leadership position has really given me an opportunity to build on some of them skills, and that's actually what I'm going to school for now, is management, because I've discovered that I'm pretty good at being a leader. I mean, I didn't start out that way, but from all my experiences and all the different types of leadership that I've had over me has given me kind of a good point of view to kind of form my own leadership style.
So you were kind of paying attention to sort of what the sergeants and the officers were doing,
Yeah.
and what worked and what didn't work, and
Yeah,
kind of
definitely.
stuck with you. Yeah.
And then I've been to 15 or 16 states, and I've met a lot of different types of people, and I've been to 3 different countries with the Army, so it's kind of given me a real good base to start from, so that I can raise my kids to have a good, diverse understanding of the world, and I'm a part of history, and history is really important to me. If I didn't like it so much, I'd go to school to be a history professor, but it's kind of a hobby of mine, and now I'm part of it, and that's why I was excited to discover this little project.
Yeah. Well, one of the nice things about this particular field is that there's a lot of ways to learn about it or get involved in it that don't require you to go to graduate school for 13,000 years and then not get a job. So,
Yeah.
I mean, management may wind up being a pretty good choice there. All right. Is there anything else that you'd like to sort of put on the record, or any particular story that kind of sticks out in your mind that you want to share here before we close out?
Yeah, I think I actually covered everything. That's a lot of talking. I've never actually told the whole story to anybody before. So
It worked very well, and it's going to be something that's going to be useful on a whole lot of levels. So thank you for coming in and talking to us today.
problem.